We have invited Christian Lichner today, who is from our custom development department, to answer some of these questions. Christian.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction, and I also want to welcome you here in Cluj. It's my third consecutive year, and yeah, as Victor already said, within the next, let's say, 60 minutes, I will tell you something about S/4HANA and the way S/4HANA changes or will change the way you implement solutions within SAP. I will be telling you something about what is S/4HANA, so just that we are on the same page. Then I will shortly introduce the paradigms that stand behind S/4HANA. What did SAP think was necessary to build this solution? And then what does this mean for us as SAP developers? And then, so wrapping up the stuff, I will also take a look beyond the horizon, so telling what comes next. Okay, what is S/4HANA? S/4HANA is a truly new product. And why is that so? We have here the upper timeline that represents the history of SAP, starting in 1973 with R1 and then finishing somewhat in 2004 with the ERP that we all know. Somewhere around here, something changed within the way the systems worked. There was a splitting between analytical applications and transactional applications, simply due to the fact that technology wasn't able to handle those two things within one system. And this was something that then was caught up by this guy, Hasso Plattner, founder of SAP, around 2005, who said, we have to bring these two systems together again. We have to bring OLTP, transactional processing, and analytical processing together. And that was somehow the birth of what we today know of SAP HANA. 2011, as Victor said, and I guess you already heard that several times, the in-memory database, or the in-memory appliance, it's definitely more than a database, was launched. And 1 year later, BW was put onto HANA. That was really a big gain. Everything that has been promised with SAP HANA as an in-memory database, making use of modern hardware, multi-core processors, non-uniform memory access, and so on and so forth, was used, and there was a huge speed up. Not surprising when you think how analytical processes work and how HANA works. Then the logical next step was, we bring the suite on HANA. So we bring the transactional processing on HANA. That was done in 2013, and there was a bit of a surprise. Things didn't work out that fine. So performance was not that good. Sometimes it was even worse. There were some problems. And the reason was that the paradigms, how applications were built before the arrival of HANA, was the database is the bottleneck. We have to fetch the data, put it into our application server, do the processing there, and then put it back to the database. That's completely contrary to what SAP HANA can do, because there, put the data-intensive logic down to the database, let the database run, use the parallelization of HANA, and let the database do the job. And, well, SAP somehow got aware of that, and they started to rethink what can we do. And they did something that was, nobody really suspected, I would guess. They really made a code split and created a new product that's called S/4HANA, that was launched in 2015. And they did not just put the suite on HANA and push the logic down. They really rethought the business logic. They really rethought the business processes. So they simplified the business processes, especially in FI, especially in logistics. They brought a new user experience, sub fiori, to S4. They reduced the data footprint due to stuff like data aging, and so on and so forth. And this is something that influenced the way applications are built within S4. And this is something that we will hear more within the talk. Taking a more global glance at S4, away from the timeline, we see that S4 is much more than just the old ERP. So we have something that SAP calls the digital core, that's the S4 HANA Enterprise Management. That's something like the suite, with the simplified processes, with the new user experience, and so on and so forth. But due to the streamlining of the processes, some complementary processes were brought out of the core and landed in these gray areas. And as you see here, Concur, Ariba, SuccessFactors, mostly cloud solutions. So due to this rethinking of the solutions, due to the redesign, we now have a complete S/4HANA suite consisting of a digital core, rock solid, keeping the core processes stable, and all those complementary processes that quite often are located in the cloud. So when SAP designed S4, there were several architectural paradigms that they put down, and that all the solutions that are part of the S4HANA core, this was the dark blue area in the picture before, had to obey to. The first one is the principle of one. Perhaps you heard about that? There are no more redundancies within the S4HANA core solutions. There are no redundancies concerning business processes. There are no redundancies concerning frameworks. If there is a domain where a framework is used, then there's only one framework that is set. For business rule processing, for example, that's BRF+. But this principle of one goes down to the data element level. So when you think about the classical solutions within the ERP and the material number, there are several of them. Now within S4, there's only one material number. That's it. So that's really principle of one to the limit. The next one is not only the complementary solutions can run in the cloud, but also the S4HANA core can run in the cloud. It's cloud first, not cloud only. That's important. So all the solutions that are designed within S4, within the S4 core, should be able to run in the cloud with all the consequences that come with that. There will be no SAP GUI within the cloud. It's not really running within the web browser, and it's not looking good. There will be no S-Pro in the cloud. There will be a different concept within S4 that's called guided configurations. So everything that's implemented within S4 has this paradigm in it, with all the consequences. Then, in addition, which was also an obstacle within the suite had to run on NEDB. So there had to be made compromises concerning the push down of data, because HANA reacts differently than an Oracle database. Within S4 will only run on HANA. There will never be a S4 HANA on Oracle or something like that. So you can really use everything that is within HANA, not only the database stuff, but also all the additional stuff like the libraries that are in there, the application function library, the predictive analysis library, and so on, text analytics, whatsoever. And last but not least, as I mentioned before, user experience for the S4HANA solutions, somehow as a side effect of this cloud first, Fiori is set. Okay, before I now start with going into details of the development model and so, there are some rumors. If you read the agenda, there is a lot of cool stuff, microservices, Java, JavaScript, mobile stuff. But one thing's for sure, ABAP's not dead. So S4HANA Core is still ABAP. It will remain ABAP. It will not be rewritten within ABAP. That t-shirt is not fake. You can buy that shirt on Spreadshirt. I do not get any incentive on that, unfortunately. But yeah, perhaps next year we can see some guys with this shirt. So what will we be taking a look at within the next 50 minutes? This is the journey map that we will go through. So we will start here, down here at the database layer, or more precisely on this connection layer between the database and the application logic. We will talk a bit about CDS views, what's there behind. Then we will take a look at transactional analytical logic implemented within the S4HANA ABAP layer, ABAP. And then we will go to the outside, we are gateway, expose our logic, build a small UI5 app, which can then be consumed on any device and can be even enriched using the mobile platform or HCPMS. We will hear something about that within the last talk today. And yeah, that's it, what you will hear today. Before we now go into the details, there are two cross topics that I want to touch that have changed since NetWeaver 740 and that somehow are really crossing everything. First one is the ABAP language. When you think back with NetWeaver 7.0, 7.02, 7.31, there were no big changes within ABAP. We had some stuff, secondary index on internal tables, but nothing cool. With NetWeaver 740, there was really a change, a dramatic change within ABAP. The syntax was completely renewed. And there was one focus, and that was the developer should no longer think about how he implements something. ABAP is a little bit verbose, but he should focus on what he does. This means that the ABAP code was, or the expressions within ABAP were redesigned with that paradigm. And when you apply them, you get really cool code, much better readable. And that's something that came with NetWeaver 740, starting with SP2, and is going on now. On Monday, NetWeaver 7.51 was released. It's really an endless story. The second thing that influences the ABAP language is the code pushdown. So push down logic from the application layer to the database if it's data intensive. And due to that, OpenSQL enhancements were made, starting with NetWeaver 7.4.0. So the SQL 92 standard is now supported. Not too early, I would guess, but at least now it's a fact. And several new artifacts have been created by SAP in order to support this code pushdown. And to support the code pushdown not on the database level, on the HANA level, but on the ABAP managed level. So you do not need to go down to the database and have a separate database user, have different transportation logic and so on. You can do everything here, from the ABAP layer. So ABAP Core Data Services, we will talk quite a lot about that. ABAP Managed Database Procedures, so implement stored procedures in ABAP. And table functions, something like, bridging the gap from views to AMDP. Okay, now we can nearly start with the journey. Next thing is tooling. Tooling changed. ABAP is no longer usually implemented within SE80. Eclipse is the strategic IDE of ABAP development. That's set by SAP. And that's also quite clear because all these new artifacts that I told you, CDS views and so on, you can only implement them in Eclipse. You have no chance within SE80. They will never come in SE80. So that's the way to go. And as far as we have experienced it, there's some learning curve. It first hurts a bit using Eclipse when you come from SE80 because it's different paradigms. How do you develop? But when you adopt it to it, you're more efficient than with SE80. Okay, now one disclaimer, nothing legal, something from our experience. S/4HANA was launched 2015. The ABAP stuff, also around that time, a little bit earlier, evolving. It's a quite young product. It's a quite young programming paradigm. So some of the stuff might be a little bit shaky. So don't go out and use everything and expect everything to work super fine. There might be some pitfalls, just to put that on the line. But usually everything should work, as usual. Okay, now we can really start with the journey. And the bottom line, the basis of everything within S4 are these CDS views. So this is where we start. We have our SAP HANA database, we have our database tables in there. Nothing changed except for the structure of the database tables within S4. Different tables, some tables got lost, index tables got thrown away, and so on. But CDS views is where the magic happens. As I mentioned before, they are the central pillar for code pushdown within S4. So all the data-intensive logic is in there. And they are really a new way to model view logic. If you think about SE11 views, they are not super cool. You cannot do a lot within SE11. So within CDS views, you really overcome all the limits of SE11 views. You can create these reusable views and with an enhanced syntax, so you have a lot more options from the SQL side. You can also put in logic, really business logic within the CDS views. And you can enrich them with semantics. So you do not have only these hardcore SQL logic in there, but you also can put in annotations and give all the stuff that you do there a meaning. And yeah, as a bottom line, with CDS views, you can really create your virtual data model. And yeah, let's take a look at that stuff, how that looks like in the system. I can see something. Come on. There we go. Okay, as you see here, Eclipse, a little bit different. You do no longer have this form-based editor, you have a text-based editor. The focus lies on packages, and starting from a package, you can now create a CDS view. I will just show you that shortly. You can also define the access logic, so you have access control DCL artifacts. We want to go for the data definition. Yeah, let's call it set test cluj. Never used it before. Several dry runs, huh? And now the cool thing within Eclipse is you do not start from scratch, so it's not like SE11, create a view and there the view is, go for the forms and fill them in. You have templates. You can define a view, a plain view. You can define a view with joins, with associations. I will say something about it. You can even use parameters within views. If you think about SE11, everything static, not cool. Within CDS views, you can put in parameters and have some logic in there. Usually, it also works with parameters. There are some exceptions, I heard. Okay, I already prepared something. This stuff is based on the enterprise procurement model. I'm quite sure you all heard about the Z-flight model, S-flight model, sorry. Completely unrealistic for playing around. But SAP also delivers within the NetWeaver a small enterprise procurement model with sales orders, headers, items, business partners, and so on and so forth, something that has to do with business. And this is something that we will focus on within the next demos. So we take the sales order header, item table, and do something. Now, how does such a CDS view look like? How is it structured? For the last rows, big enough? Okay. It has a header section where you see this add stuff, which are the annotations. This is now something that is an annotation relevant for the catalog. This is the catalog view name, so you can take a look at the view with SE11, but you will not see everything for sure. You also have something like an end user text, and then you just define a view, give it a name, no longer these restrictions from SE11. Select from a database table. This is the sales order header table. Let's forget these association lines for a moment. And you can then define your columns of your selection. So you have here all the different fields. You can give them dedicated names. And here you see you can put in logic. So you can put in a case within your view. This case is evaluated and exposed as a specific column. You also see that you can enhance that with semantics. If you have a currency code in there and an amount field, you can link them. You can say, okay, this is a currency code. This is the amount that belongs to the currency code. So that's already, I think, quite some stuff that is useful. But that's not all. I talked about this virtual data model. And what you saw here are these associations. So you have your sales order header table, and this is somehow linked to items, to business partners, and so on and so forth. Usually what you would do is create a join with these tables that is then executed every time you query the view. That's not optimal from a performance point of view and perhaps not necessary. You just want to put within a view the information, that's the header table, that are the associations to the other tables. And that's exactly what this statement does. It associates one table with the other tables, gives it a cardinality, and you can also expose these associations to the outside. For example, like here, like we did for items. Exposing them does not mean that you expose the complete structure of the table. We will see that because you can open this one with a data preview, which gives you now a SQL console and a select on the table. And what you will see here is no underscore item, right? There is no item table. Why? Because the select, because this exposing of the association as a whole does not resolve the join. So what you have here is you can now follow these associations, and you can do that within ABAP too. If you do not query them, the join is not executed. If you go and use so-called path expressions and query explicitly the association, then it's resolved. And you can directly do that here also as a preview within this raw data presentation. And now you have all the items. So you really can build up from these CDS views your data model, and you have no problems with performance. Depends on how you build it, but usually not. Now the first question, if you are a consultant, if you do custom development, is okay, cool. SAP certainly delivers some tables, some views. Usually the customer wants to append some fields. Do I have to copy the stuff? Do I have to need some additional views in order to get my appended fields in the view? No, you can extend views. I think you can see this symbol here. Perhaps you know it from the enhancement framework. When you did implicit enhancement, this was something that showed up. And that's the same here. That's also available within CDS views. You can extend CDS views with this simple statements. So you extend this basic view with an extension, say what additional fields do I want within my selection list. There are some restrictions within up to NetWeaver 750. When you can do that and when you can't do that, they are resolved within NetWeaver 7.51. And that's it. So typical stuff that customers need, it's available. Okay. So that's somehow the first glance at the CDS views. If it's now again not working, I need more time. No. Okay, now we have the CDS view, we have the data, and now we want to show it within a report. Classical requirement. How do we expose the logic? The way within S4 is SAP Gateway. So we want to go outside. What is SAP Gateway? It's really the connection to the outside. It's been out there for quite a while, so it's also available on the suite within the NetWeaver. And it's a secure communication layer between the backend and your front-end stuff. And as is depicted here, it's using OData as a protocol. That's an open industry standard. And what's quite interesting is also you see here this classical Fiori stuff. The OData protocol is exposed as long as your front end understands OData, which most of the front ends do. You can build apps on that. So this is something that was brought up 2008 with this timeless software architecture, back-end stable, front end can move. So the older guys perhaps have heard that once. This is now reality, 2016, not too early, but now we can really build arbitrary apps. And as I said before, here it's in the business suite you have your classical DIMPRO stuff, perhaps Web DIMPRO if you're lucky. But here within S4, it's really one central pillar for the communication. Now, how do we create these OData services? There are two ways. You can create them manually within the SAP Gateway service builder. You can import or reference data dictionary objects like CDS views. That's quite cumbersome, not cool. Cool guys, having NetView 7.50. Use annotations to automatically create the necessary artifacts of an OData service. And, well, if you see demos on Tacket or so, they just put in the annotation and say, hey, everything's running. That's nearly true. For the first time you put in the annotation, you have to go to SPRO and register the service, and to the gateway stuff, and do it once. So one time you get in touch with the old world. But I will also fake. So I will not go to the gateway. Sorry for that. Again, I prepared a little view. It's the same one as before. And now exposing something as an OData service is super simple. It's this line. One annotation, you're there. If you ask yourself, where do these annotations come from? How do I know them? There is an ABAP help on that. It's not that helpful, to be honest. But you have type ahead within Eclipse. So you have them all here. So if you say OData, you see, okay, that's an easy one. And self-explaining. So activate the view. You get a little bubble here. And what this bubble then does is, hey, we have an OData service generated for you. Open it. And here, you have the service endpoint. So you can now take a look at the metadata of the OData service, which gives you all the information what's contained within the OData service. So what entities are exposed, what properties are in there, and also what we modeled before, this association stuff, what navigation properties do you have to navigate from one object to the next. And yeah, let's go to this stuff that we had. It was this one, the OData. And you see here all the properties that we have defined are now exposed. And what you also see, here we have all these navigation properties to buyer, to items that are available here. And this OData protocol is sometimes referred to as ODBC of the web. That's not super correct, but gives you some idea what you can make with this OData stuff. You can now really query things. So if you take a look here, you have the entity, and you say, hey, I want one specific GUID, and I want it formatted within JSON format. And then you see the metadata, and then you see the data of this one single sales order header. And also the URLs of the associations that you have. So you can now navigate from one item, one header to the items. It's just one option here away, 2 items. And here we go. Here we have the items. So that's really quite easy. So we have built now our model. We have exposed it via OData with one annotation. Now we can go one step further, right? We are now at the outside world. As I said before, user experience within S4 is UI5 SAP Fiori. What is UI5? Just to remind you, it's the enterprise-ready web toolkit of SAP based on HTML5. So you have JavaScript, CSS, HTML. You have some libraries in there, jQuery, LESS, and so on. And this enterprise-ready web toolkit allows you really a consistent user experience. If you think about the modules that SAP uses, if you think about the DUN pros, every module somehow looks different and has its own philosophy. The guys who do it in insurance, if you jump from CD to claims to policy management, you think it's a completely different world. Is it SAP? Is it, I don't know. This is something that's not really possible. Yeah, you can do that, but then you really do something wrong with UI5. You have quite some feature-rich UI controls now, so it's really a lot you can do with UI5 in the enterprise world. So you won't code cool games apps with UI5. You could, but they're not so cool then. But for enterprise, it's really okay, and it's responsive. So you do not have to think about when you code if it's running on a tablet or on a laptop. You can just run it. It's a configuration question. Here you see Open UI5, so that's the open source part. SAP is, since a few years, really heavily supporting open source with Eclipse. They are one of the main contributors within Eclipse. With Apache or Lingo, for example, they're heavily contributing, but also with this UI5 framework, OpenUI5. And OpenUI5 is a subset of SAP UI5. SAP UI5 is the stuff you get when you buy a license. It's a subset. There are some libraries that are not contained within UI5 that are part of SAP UI5. Mostly, I think, some libraries for graphs and for charts and so on. Okay, so that's UI5, just to remember you. And now the question is, how do we implement UI5? How did we implement it in the past, and how can we implement it now? I will focus on this left part now. So here is where we start somehow. So we have our OData service, we have our SAP UI5 controls, we have our SAP UI5 libraries, and then we do some freestyle coding, more or less. So we create our UI5 application. We have a very high degree of flexibility. We have the service, and we can do with the controls what we want, as long as Fiori allows it. But that's not really efficient. If you think about this requirement that I mentioned before, hey, I need a report. That was not an issue when you did that within ABAP, report, one program, few minutes. With documentation, 2 days. This is something that's really cumbersome within UI5 because you always have to do it from scratch. Yeah, you can copy, but who copies? So this is something that was not really good. For sure, you could then, in general, you have some flexibility during the runtime. You can adopt it, you can customize it according to this pyramid, finally personalize it, and you have your UI. But this was, yeah, you had great flexibility, but no efficiency. Then SAP thought about something that's, we have the metadata. Why don't we enrich the metadata and go with some model-driven approach? Taking the metadata, make the UI5 controls super smart, and let them create the logic by themselves. Do no more coding. So just create the OData, put in this additional information, and let UI5 do its thing and expose it. Highly efficient, no coding really necessary, not really flexible. You are restricted to the stuff you can do with these annotations. This is, was called smart templates, also called smart design, smart controls. This changed. If you take a look now at the documentation, it's called Fiori Elements now. I think because SAP really got annoyed when they got asked, do we also have some dump templates or something like that? Because they are smart. So it's now Fiori Elements. And for sure, as you can have the smartness within single controls, you can also make some hybrid applications. Nothing to do with mobile hybrid applications, but a mixture of freestyle design and this annotation-driven stuff. So this is now something that we will focus on, that I will show you. And what SAP used is something that was available within OData, which comes with OData out of the box. It's called vocabulary. So this is now an annotation XML file where we have this entity type, that you saw before. Here corresponding to an item, and what you see here are some property, okay, that's company name, the type, okay, that's the classical OData stuff, EDM string. And then you have several additional information that's labeled with SAP. And this is the extension concept of OData. So you can enhance the vocabulary, so it's called, with additional information, and you can then use that then within the consumer of the OData service of this metadata stuff. And this is something that is then done within the UI5 views. The UI5 view, here a smart filter boss or smart control, knows, oh, okay, I am used for the entity type item. So, yeah, then I can take this metadata and I can display this label. I know there is some filtering required, and so on and so forth. The question is now, we have our CDS view. We have exposed it via OData. We have already a little bit of annotations in there. How do we do that? This is now something that really came with NetWeaver 750. You have a lot of annotations. You have really a lot of annotations. They cover completely different aspects of the use cases. So you have, for example, annotations for the analytic stuff. Is it a cube, star join, and so on. You can have annotations concerning searches. And you have one big group of annotations, that's this add UI dot, that allow you to put information into the CDS view that is then used by the UI in order to be generated. And this is now something that I also want to show you. Same game as before, I guess. Okay. So what do we have here? I have now streamlined the view a bit. So we have the sales order and sales order header and the items. And what you see here now is a lot of annotations that have this add UI in front. So for example here, I mean, we have a view on a table, so it's a list probably. So we have here the items of the list. It's a line item. We specify a label. And we say, okay, that's on position 10, so on the first position, so to say. Then we have some fields that we don't want to see on the UI. We have another field that we want to see on the UI. And we want this field as a selection field. So we want to use this field in order to make some filtering on it. And we also have some additional semantic fields that do not really influence the UI representation. So I did that for the sales order header view. I also did that for the items view. So if we navigate to the items view, you also see here we have these UI annotations in there. And what you can do now is you can use this service. I mean, we have exposed it via OData. No, not that one, that one. We have exposed it via OData, so there is an OData service. The metadata contains this annotation stuff. And we can now build our service. We will go to the HANA Cloud Platform, start the Web IDE, preferred tool for creating UI5 apps. And then we can start a new project from template. Here, don't look for Smart, look for Fiori elements. And you have this classical list report application that you can use. Then we have Conclusion 2016. I will now just copy that down. Don't do this at home. Give it a meaningful description, give it a meaningful title. And then, within HCP, you can create destinations to backend systems, to ABAP backend systems, for example. We did so. And you get now then the catalog of OData services. As you see here, we have this OData service that we created before. And we have here this annotated OData service. And I will tick this one. And the next step then within the Fiori elements procedure is to fetch the annotations file. This is the annotations file that comes out of the backend. And we say, okay, as it's the only one, I think we use it. And then we have to specify the OData collection, so which entity type do I want to display, and due to the information, due to the association, it also already fills the OData navigation that is available. The second association that I used was resolved within the view, that's why it's not offered here. So if you ask yourself that. Okay, now I'll make that a little bit bigger. Let's take a look how the app looks like. We have the web app folder, UI5 guys know that, and then the folder structure is a little bit smaller than at a classical UI5 web app. If we take a look at that one, we have this model view controller paradigm, so we have views, we have a model, we have a controller, we have internationalization, test, and so on and so forth. Somehow lacking here, but we have the magical folder annotations, where all the information is in order to make the UI run. And let's see if it runs. I will now make it run on... That would have cost me a few minutes. Run it within a mock server. Because here the filtering is better to see. Okay, so here we have the Fiori Launchpad running within mock. And here we see now the sales order list. We have to make one query. And here we go. We did nothing except the view, the annotations, and do the wizard do its stuff. And what we get is something like a list report with all the fields that we have, with the names that we specified. You have now, out of the box, several functionalities that are available, like sorting, like grouping. If there are additional columns that have not been explicitly exposed by these UI annotations, they are here. You can put them in. The columns that you specified with hidden, they are not available. And what you also can see is we have these selection fields. So we specified two fields, the ID and the last name of the employee, in order to make the filtering. And we did nothing more than just that. And if we now say last name 1, so last name contains last name 1 in some way, and kick off the query again, you see the select works without anything that we had to do, just because of the interplay between OData and our annotations. So that's really something that pushes the efficiency. For sure, if you really want a really, really nice UI, you have to go the hybrid way, I would guess, because this is somewhat limited. Okay. That was that one. So we now somehow got up here. Now within SAP we have some analytical use cases, but quite often we have some transactional logic to implement. And the question is now, what about transactions within S/4HANA? Is there anything different how we implement that? Is there anything different how business objects look like? Yes. So within S/4HANA, according to the principle of one, there is one framework that is set for the modeling of business object and for the implementation of business logic. and that's the Business Object Processing Framework, BOPF. That's also out for quite some time now, stemming originally from Business by Design. And this is the way how we implement that. So BOPF in general, it's a framework that's not specific for S4. It's in general, you can implement any ABAP or application with BOPF. You have support within the development, within the design time, and you also have some additional services concerning testing and concerning interaction with the business objects using an API. So what you have is, you have a design time, you have a business object builder, and here you define your business object, something like this data model that we defined, right? So we have some nodes, parent, child, cardinalities, perhaps we have persistent nodes, transient nodes, whatsoever, and we have some defined types of business logic that are called at defined points in time. So we have actions, derivations, validations that can be assigned to these nodes that contain attributes, keys, and so on, and that are executed. When you use a BOP without any let's say, CDS or so, you can also generate your persistency layer, and during runtime you have an API in order to interact with BOPF objects. And you also have a test environment that you can use in order to make some sandbox testing. What's really nice is you have quite some ecosystem around the BOPF. That's here. So this processing framework itself is made to do something with business objects. But there are always some connections to infrastructure, to user interfaces, and so on that are nice to have, and that they come also with BOPF, like integration of change documents, like application logging, like integration of the BRF Plus. And also to the front end, we have the integration to WebDim Pro Floor Plan Manager with the FBI, and we have integration to Gateway OData with GBI. So this is something where you don't really have to think about, that comes with BOPF. So if you use BOPF, you can also participate, or you have the advantage to have an ecosystem around it that makes your life in general easier. Okay. Now, if you think about, okay, we made the CDS views, we made our business object model, and now this guy was talking for 50 minutes about CDS views, and now he says, okay, for business logic, I now need the BOPF. Do I have to re-implement it? I don't want to double my logic. Absolutely, that's not the way to go. And it is not. Annotations. It's once again annotations. So you can, within NetWeaver 750, to be fair, annotate your CDS views in order to create the infrastructure out to BOPF. So you have this class of annotations that are called @object model that allow you to specify if a CDS view is a business object, if it's a root or a node, how the associations are running. And you can also specify the CRUD operations, and you can also specify what is the persistency. In what table do I want to put in the data if there is a write operation? So let's take a look how this looks like in the system. So it's really this easy. You have your CDS view, you put in the object model annotations, and you have here on the sales order header, you say this is the root node of my BOPF, and you say, you specify if it's creatable, updatable, deletable, and so on and so forth. You say business object is the category, and you can also define if an association that's defined within the CDS view should be used in order to create an additional node within BOPF. So to put up this hierarchy that I showed you before. So when we take now a look at this association, you will see that also here we have these object model annotations, and you have here the association type to header. So you can navigate forth and back. And what the infrastructure does for you is it creates you, as it said here, a business object. So let's take a look at the business object. Now the cool thing is the BOPF tools, they are available within SAP GUI, but they are also now coming step by step within Eclipse. So you can really stay within Eclipse, and you can also stay within the Eclipse style. So usually if something's not there in Eclipse, you navigate back to GUI. Forward navigation in Eclipse is F3. Guess what is backward navigation in sub-GUI? So if you're used to Eclipse, then you really sometimes get crazy when a GUI opens. And what you see here now is that's exactly the way we modeled our business object. So it's there within the BOPF, and if we go to the root node, we see now that the infrastructure of BOPF already created all the relevant stuff that we need in order to interact with the business object, like persistent structure. If we would have a transient structure, we would also have this really a combined structure consisting of those. We have this primary persistence that we specified, and we have all the behavior on the node. So for example, we can then from here go to validations, and we have a validation here that we already implemented, and you can go now navigate to the class and do your work. So it's really an integrated development environment, an integrated development circle from CDS view to BOPF object to the business logic that is contained within the BOPF. Yeah, the business logic, just to give you a glance, it's it needs a little bit of adoption in order to write it the right way. It's not completely self-explaining, but it's doable. You're adopting to that. So now what we can do is we can implement business objects, but the goal within S4 is set a little bit higher than just implementing business objects. And when it comes to transactional applications, SAP said, okay, I want to start my application on one device. So I start typing in on my mobile, and at some point in time it gets cumbersome to use the mobile. I want to go to my desktop or my laptop. So I want to start on one device, continue on another one. Perhaps I want to start now and I cannot finish processing, so I want to pass the work to somebody else. Or perhaps I can finish, but I don't like to finish. Somebody else will do it. What's also important when you think about SAP applications, save it incompletely and continue later. I put in some data, perhaps it's not even correct within the fields. Wrong date, a not validated field, but I wanted to save it and continue later. And I want to keep on working. If you think about UI5, web app, perhaps I lose connectivity. Now, if you think about a transactional application, there are more than 2 fields. I entered them and everything's away. If I lose my connection and I have to do it again. So it would be cool to have a asynchronously periodical saving of my stuff. Now, if you think about a web app, about OData as it's specified, you have the stateless approach. It's a web app, right? So maybe stuff gets lost. That's why SAP came up with the so-called draft concept. I think most of the folks here are developers, and you know your classes. And within SC80, if you start editing, the class gets inactive, right? This is something that was adopted here for these objects. So you have an active document, some sales order item that's in your database, and you start editing it. Then a new draft gets created. The old object stays in the database, it's valid, it's active, it's okay. It's locked for other changes. And you can work on the draft. You can save the draft, you can save it incomplete, perhaps data connection gets lost. It's there because it's periodically saved. And at some point in time, like within development, you do your syntax check, you activate it. You do the same here. So perhaps you edit it, and at some point in time, you activate it. At this point, all the business logic runs. Field validation, and so on and so forth. And if all these checks are passed, the draft will be raised to the active document and is the new version of your sales order, for example. This is something that I cannot show you because it was delivered with 750. You find some draft infrastructure within your system. This is something that you should definitely not use because it gets deleted with SP3 or 4 of 750. And the final solution will come with NetWeaver 7.51 for this draft concept. So with 7.51, the infrastructure for implementing a draft within S4 and also within other solutions is available. NetWeaver 7.51 is available since Monday, this Monday, and there are also a lot of other nice features in there. So if you think about the CDS view annotations, I'm quite sure that some of you thought, I have SQL logic, and then I clutter my SQL logic with this metadata information. Not cool. This has nothing to do with the SQL logic. And within 7.51, you can extract the metadata information into a separate file. You have your SQL logic, you have your metadata, everything's cool. So yeah, NetWeaver 7.51. Okay, that's all. So we are through. We started from our CDS views, built our data model, had some kind of analytics case. So yeah, we pulled out the data using Gateway. We are OData. We implemented within a few minutes a UI5 app that represented the report. Then we took a look at the transactional logic, BOPF, as the framework that is used for this transactional logic. We took a look a little bit in the future concerning the draft concept that is used within S4. And yeah, there's not really more to say concerning this programming model, except for this stuff. So I would need another hour, I would guess, in order to go through that. So I mentioned at the start, you can even make a more extreme type of code pushdown using AMDPs and table functions. This is really implementing the SQL script, HANA native stored procedures. If you really have a use case where you need performance at the edge, again, it's ABAP managed. So you do not need to implement logic in the database, it's all ABAP managed. Then, as I mentioned before, it's cloud first, not cloud only. There are several stuff that came with this cloud focus within ABAP that is, from my point of view, extremely useful. For example, the concept of key user extensibility, something that I guess the business users dreamt of. We have now a concept where you can, if you have the right permission, add fields to your UI. You add the fields, and the system generates all the stuff down to the database, extending the OData service, extending the corresponding artifacts within ABAP, and creating a new field on the database table. So you do not have to go to the data dictionary, put in fields into the append, go to the service builder, put it there, and so on and so forth. That's something that comes with the key user extensibility. You also have restricted ABAP, something that's especially the guys who do product development dreamt of for quite some time. So you can now restrict the ABAP statements that are used. You can restrict the way APIs are used. So you have now API concept within ABAP, so really cool. You have this guided configuration stuff. Yeah, that's replacing the old IMG. So you have now a business point of view, how do I configure my solution? Not 17 somehow interlinked IMG nodes that I have to fill in the right order, because otherwise I'm lost. No, you have now UR5 kind of guided procedures where you configure your system. Then you have different extension scenarios. This is mostly in-app extensions, like we know it from the suite. But as I said before, when you think about this picture on the third slide, this blue rectangle with these gray rectangles with these cloud solutions, you can also think about, I have my core, I have my APIs, and I somehow want to connect some cloud stuff to it. That's then a side-to-side enhancement of my S4 core. I can implement something in the cloud, connect it to the core, and I have my new application. This is something that will also be touched by the next talk when it comes to HCP. And for sure, due to this stuff, you have a lot of integration scenarios. So thinking about HANA Cloud Platform, thinking about new business models using the API management, exposing services to the outside. With API management that is Apigee based, you can now really expose services and charge them. Really cool. So let's wrap it up. I hope I could show you that S4HANA really triggered a renewal of the ABAP development, of the SAP development in general. And this is not just some punctual stuff. This is really something that touches the complete development ecosystem. From the tooling, the language features, the paradigms, how do I implementations, push the logic down, use this draft stuff, to the frameworks, BOPF, to the integration technologies, SAP Gateway, OData as a protocol, to the user interfaces. Fiori 2.0 will come up, or is already coming up with the next S4 release, 16.10 or 16.11. Cannot be 16.10 because it's not yet out. So this is also something that comes and that's really influencing the way we will implement solutions in the future. And there is also a really good news. Most of the stuff is not part of S4, it's part of the NetWeaver. So if you have a NetWeaver release that's high enough, you can use it. Perhaps, as I said before, there are some pitfalls. Perhaps you have to rethink to use some stuff on a non-HANA DB, but in principle, for playing around, it's all there. Okay. So that's all. I think my time is nearly over. Yeah, I don't know where this rumor comes from that I take more than 60 minutes for a talk, but are there any questions?
Microphones. Yeah. Questions, please. There's a question. Yes.
So I have a question regarding the draft concept.
Mm-hmm.
I have the following scenario in mind. If I come and edit a sales order, then a draft is created. When you come and try to edit the same sales order, will you see the draft or will you see the active version?
I will see that there is a draft to the active version. And the creation of the draft creates a lock on this active version. So I can read it, but I can no longer edit it. So there is really this draft concept is something really tricky because this lock at some point in time has to be removed. And this is also part of this draft infrastructure.
Okay, so you will only work on this sales order until you finish and then I can take it over?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Or I move it to you via workflow or something like that, then another person can work on it, yeah. But it's not like optimistic locking. First one that saves wins. No, it's really locked.
I was just thinking about your example about classes and...
Yeah, no, it's not super the same, but it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I understand the big picture. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Maybe from my side.
Super. I think time is over.
Is there anything mentioned regarding really HANA native development in the context of S4, or do you just do it from an ABAP layer and use AMDPs and?
From the S4 core architectural point of view, all the stuff that is within S4 core has to be ABAP managed, because it's simply a mess to think about transportation within the cloud. It's a mess if you have this HANA managed stuff and the ABAP managed stuff. Nevertheless, if you think about extension scenarios, why shouldn't you use a HANA native application in order to extend your digital core? In order to do that, so it's not or do I use this or that, but it's a complementary situation where you can use this one to extend the other one. But for the S4 core, it's really ABAP. Again, no matter what these other guys tell you in the next 2 hours, it's ABAP.
Thank you. Anyway, you will identify the speakers by their color, so please do not let them rest in the break. Just hit them with questions. So thank you, Christian.
Okay, I thank you for your attention and enjoy the rest.